I was preparing and I went, oh my God, it's in the COA. The light came out. But that's what happens when you were in council meetings last night.
Oh,
Yeah.
gosh. Okay, it being 10:10, I'm going to call the meeting of the Town Council's Financial Oversight Committee to order on Wednesday, June 24th at 10 a.m. The first order of business is the approval of the minutes of June 17th. And I've read them, found no issue with them. If anybody else has a comment, I would
I
entertain.
was fine with them.
Yeah.
I would move to recommend approval.
Okay,
I'll second.
6, 7, 8 minutes.
all right. Having had the motion and the second, any further discussion? If not, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right. The other minutes to be approved are the executive meeting minutes of April 29th and also of June 12th. Both of those concerned personnel. Do I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes of April 29th, executive session meeting minutes of April 29th and June 12th?
Motion, I'll make a motion to approve April 29th and is it June 12th?
June
Yeah.
12th.
And June 12th.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion, having a motion and a second? If not, all those in favor of accepting the minutes as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. That's taken care of. Okay, going to proceed with the finalization of the budget. We don't have any new worksheets. I know that Jim has been working on it. However, we had an asterisk marked on the portion of the police budget that had to do with the front desk attendant. And the request at that time was $66,128. I've heard from various members of the committee that they felt that request was a little high for us this year since it's the first time out and it's the initial creation of this position. I would entertain any discussion on a solution to that or a reduction to that budget.
So I'll start the discussion. I think, we discussed our concerns at our last meeting as well.
Yes.
And understanding the fact that maybe there's some coverage that needs to be done, but perhaps not as long as the hours as the chief has proposed. But the increase on his most recent proposal was from 125 to 66, 128. I'd like to make a motion to reduce that new increase of 66, 128 to $54,800 for greeter positions and hours, and let the chief determine the best use of that money for the purposes that he's trying to use it for. That would be a difference of $11,328 that would we would reduce the proposed police budget from what we looked at last week.
Okay, so the actual appropriation would be, you said 54.8?
54.8 increase for the purposes of the greeters, obviously allowing the chief to determine the best way to utilize that. And for that, it would come out to, just one moment, a new budget of $2,948,775.79. A difference of $11,328 from the $2,960,000 that we had talked about last week.
Okay, any other thoughts on that? Do I have a second on Jim's motion.
I'll second his motion. I agree with what Jim just described, and I think that's a good,
Okay,
it will help.
yeah. All right, and it will be strictly up to the police chief to allocate the coverages he deems fit. Okay, all those in favor? Any further discussion before all those in favor? Please
Aye.
say aye.
Aye.
All
Chris,
right,
could I
that
just have the
changes.
number again?
My,
the-
it's a reduction of 11,328, so my number that I had was 2,948,775.79.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. The only other matter that stands before us for change is I would like a report from the chairman of the Capital Projects Committee. I realize that some of the monies from the enterprise funds, namely sewer, water, and stormwater enterprise, we were told that it was from borrowing, but if some of that monies is coming from the retained earnings, I think this committee needs to know that. So I don't know if you have any more information on that,
I
Mary?
don't, you want me to call Ryan now, see if he's,
Yeah, if you would. Because as I was stating before, if the stormwater, it's the first year out, they would have to be borrowing for that street sweeper.
It was my understanding, in having been on the capital planning committee, that particularly in the case of the stormwater, sewer, and water fund, the projects were gonna be borrowed.
All of it.
Yes.
None of it from retained earnings.
I don't believe so, no.
No, it's all, it shows here that it's all from borrowed.
Yeah, I've got the note borrowing for the totals, but I wanted to confirm that.
Yeah.
That's why I always couch mine as my understanding.
that was my understanding too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
He's smart enough not to answer when he sees it's my number.
Your call has been forwarded.
Yeah,
Um,
that's okay. If everybody has the same understanding that it's borrowing and not using retained earnings, I think. So that the borrowing costs are included in those amounts when you talk to Don? Because this
I don't
is-
believe the borrowing costs are included in Dawn's figures yet.
Oh. Okay,
The number that we showed for the water, sewer, and stormwater were actually the actual cost of the item.
yeah,
We did make the calculations for debt service, or what we thought might be debt service in FY '21 for the general fund new debt, but we didn't do that for the water, sewer, and stormwater debt.
so, are you, I don't like to assume.
I have a suggestion.
Yeah.
I believe you're correct, Jim, but maybe we could have Mary try reaching out to Dawn.
Yeah,
Dawn did send me something yesterday about some of the debt service retirement and so forth, the retirement of the debt service. I don't have it handy for you right now, but can get it certainly.
okay.
So I don't believe that we forecasted that when we presented the budget last year, at least for the water
No,
and
'cause we-
sewer and
Yeah, there was.
for the enterprise
there
funds with,
I don't know if we had included, you don't think we
we
included?
included it in the report as to approved capital projects
Right.
and the sorts of funding,
Yeah,
but we didn't include an anticipated debt service for each of those enterprise fund projects that we were gonna borrow for.
Yeah,
Yeah, we changed the amount in the project line item indicating like the feasibility study was 1,260,000, and the debt service on that would have been 121,667 at that time. I'm assuming that stayed the same, so we put that number in the capital for the.
Yeah, but all I'm saying is that I don't believe that we projected debt service for
No.
the sewer and water and stormwater enterprise funds last year when we presented the
Right.
budget.
No.
With the understanding that they would be managed within those enterprise funds.
because we don't have anything, we've got the principal, in here for the long-term debt. But she does have 50,000 in for short-term borrowing, but that's usually in case she has to borrow to meet the budget in case the tax rate's not set. I think it'd be good to touch base with Don and see what the story is there.
If I may say, the principal and interest for the water and sewer was included in the water and sewer. And I believe it was used the same number as last year for this year,
Okay,
so.
all righty.
Yeah, I mean, if we're asking, can that absorb at all the debt service payments? We've been told by Bruce that he's made those calculations and they will be able to absorb it. There were some small increases, but they didn't seem unreasonable. But I'm sure if he had that, if he wanted that to be shared, just to see what the calculations are, I mean, that could be done, I assume.
Yeah.
Let me make sure I understand. Is that the specific information you want from Don? What the debt service is out of each of the enterprise funds for the projects that they are going to be funding?
Yes, yes. And if she feels that the enterprise funds will absorb those costs, as long as it doesn't hit the tax rate.
I think though that question, Chris, needs to be also directed at Bruce, because for him, it's gonna be a combination of the funds debt service and the rate, the rate for the
Right.
service.
Right. Now, all the projects that add up to the $1,015,092, I was advised, I think it was you, Jim, that told me that the debt service is included on the feasibility study for the school, but we still don't know if the council's gonna do that as a debt exclusion or not. So I think that's something that down the road, everything else is from taxation, except for that item.
No, there's one other.
Steam pipe.
The steam piping.
Yeah.
The steam piping is also.
Yes, those are the two,
Yeah.
those are the two proposed bonded projects, so.
Okay, a 5-year and
Yeah.
a 30-year, okay.
And,
The steam pipe, and what was the other one?
The school.
The feasibility, okay.
Yeah,
I think with the school feasibility study, we have it there. If the council chose to do a debt exclusion, that would just, take it off the burden.
right,
Well, off the
Yeah.
budget,
Off the rate.
but not the taxpayer's overall
Yeah.
burden. And we also didn't try to monkey around with the estimated reimbursement or whatever, because,
yeah,
we don't know that for sure, but theoretically. So it's
Right.
kind of a conservative number that
Yeah.
was put in.
from what I understand, it's a 5-month, estimate
Yes.
projection. May not know that at the time of tax setting. Just to be aware. Okay, so those are the only changes then to what we received at the last meeting, from the 6/17. So the only changes are that reduction, for the police department and the increase for the capital projects. So Jim, you'll be able to work up something for us from there?
Yeah, I started with the department budgets and kind of started from there.
Yeah.
So I have that kind of in a format that's easier to print, Olga, and I was looking at what we presented last year, and, you know, we want to look at reserves. I
Yeah.
think we reported on what the impact of the budget was and how that would, you know, how we would project where the reserves are for the town. And then we want to project the tax rate. So those are the two additional kind of material examples or exhibits that we use. So we
Yeah.
started off with a summary of the project, of the revenue, then a summary of revenue minus expenses to show where we were, department budgets, so in case anybody had issues, and then we went to what that meant for the purposes of tax rate and reserves. And we
Yeah.
also went through the approved capital projects,
Yeah, yeah.
and that was pretty much the presentation.
You know, again, I think the qualifying factor in this, in these calculations is that they are not final, that it's provisional only, because we don't have any information from the state, and it's not getting any better.
No, it's not getting any better.
No, and, as someone said earlier, I think it was you, Diane, we're waiting on the state's waiting on the federal. They're talking about a $6 billion deficit on the state. I read an article where obviously the legislators are struggling with their commitment to education made last year. And one of them stated that it probably would be level funded, the Chapter 70 would be level funded, but now they're questioning what they're gonna do with that Student Opportunity Act. So, until those numbers come in, the best that we're doing is submitting a balanced budget with the information that we have at this point in time. So, I guess that July 7th meeting would be.
It's 14, July 14.
Yeah, but we're gonna meet on the 7th.
Oh, okay.
We're gonna try to finalize everything,
Boy, I
look
am
at what
asleep
Jim
today.
has put together. If you need help with that, Jim, as far as making copies for everybody,
Yeah,
I'll be glad to, as we did last year.
we met at the UPS store on North
Yes.
Main.
So,
But I'll be, I think what I may do is take this one and at least the expenses and share it out to everybody as a separate document, just so you can see that. The question I had is, due to size, I mean, it's just a matter of how small the print gets. We truncated the notes on the, or the comments on the budget that, of the budgets that were submitted, so there's a lot of comments regarding the budgets that were submitted. And I think last year we did include a certain amount of comments about, you know, what was going on, you know, about the budget. So we may want to try to make room for that, make sure that the comments are up to date or accurate based on where we are now. So
Yeah.
what I may do, even, it'll be easier to read on the screen. It makes it kind of small when you try to print it out, because we have those comments, then we have the other comments that we've added since about the numbers and
Yeah.
things like that. But
okay,
I think we'll probably want to, you know, vet our notes and so that it helps people
I'm
walk
thinking
through
of
the
some-
changes.
right off the top of my head, like no OPED,
Yeah.
payment this year, no payment into stabilization this year. The use of fiscal 20, chapter 70 aid, the reduction of unrestricted local aid by 14% and so forth. So, yes, and those comments would be
Yeah.
illuminating, for anybody reading, so,
Chris, have we, last year we estimated our valuation so we could estimate a potential tax rate. So have we tried to do that again to estimate it for FY21 and a valuation to put up against our,
Yeah, I would
What
only
we're
do
gonna have to
that with
raise.
Diane. She's the expert in that area.
yes, right.
So I have had conversations individually with my assessors, and they all agree that the values most likely will go up, but a little. So what a little is, and as I've said before, that we're just getting out to do our building permits now, in fact, started today, so until we get all of our data put in, we really will not know the direction that we're going, but
So
I'm
would it
gonna
be
say
more conservative now to use what we used as a projection last year for
and
valuation?
I think last year was at 1.5%,
Yeah.
is that what?
Yeah, that sounds
Yeah.
familiar.
Yes,
And so I would say that would be a little.
yeah.
Use exactly what we used last year?
I think I would feel comfortable, again, I can't speak for the Board of Assessors, but
Yeah.
for projection purposes, I can at least anticipate at least 1%.
All right. So use
Possi-
last year for
Yeah.
our purposes for now. Okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
The valuation we estimated last year plus the 1%, or do we have to estimate? I mean, that one was do we have the valuation?
So you have the base value in our documents plus the anticipated valuation from new growth. So then at that point, I would say you would take that number and maybe add 1% to it.
So last year's value plus the new growth plus 1%, she feels that would be safe.
And plus the new growth?
The new growth has already been added, the valuation anticipated from the new growth has already been added into the total valuation for the town on page 1 of our document at the bottom.
Okay, all right. So just the 1% then?
Correct.
All right.
Now, the 500,000 is an increase in tax dollars,
Correct.
but the value of the new growth.
And we did project that, I believe it was like 20-some million.
20-some, okay.
You can actually see that we were at on the very first page, the actual from FY20, the flat tax rate, flat valuation, and then in the second column, the estimate. So you can see that it is,
Okay, so it would be 2,079,306,000.
Plus 1%?
yes, and I'm not the mathematical genius when it comes to Excel, but I do know that when I look at those numbers, there's 3 more zeros after that
Yes.
306. It always throws me off when I'm looking at it shortened, but yes, you can most likely comfortably add 1% if you're trying to determine.
And that'd be another note on there of what we did.
Right, exactly, in terms of assumptions, yeah.
Yeah,
I just had one other in terms of
sure.
The reserve balances. So I think we've seen them before, but I'm not sure if I can find them out of all the stuff I had in terms of the stabilization fund balance, in certified free cash,
Yeah, I know that's 1,118,000 or
and the
something like that.
OPEB fund balance that we've stocked away. If we could get that, that would be great, because I think those are the ones that we
Yeah.
use.
Okay.
Chris, could I ask a question? So, well, maybe it's not a Finance Oversight Committee question, it's maybe more a council question. Are you looking for another separate document from me as the draft, since our deadline is come and gone for that? Because
Well-
basically, everything that we've discussed here has been agreed upon through,
Yes.
from my eyes anyway.
And
And so rather than, but I have to submit a budget that has the school committee's voted budget in it, which would be a differentiation from the amount that
Yeah.
this committee has voted on. That, as
Well-
far as I know, is the only difference.
I think you can make a statement to that effect to the council. Kathy, you're,
I mean, you might want to think about that. I mean,
yeah.
it's,
Well,
Because in the-
when all is said and done, we have to have in this case, a provisional FY21 budget that we can vote on and then ultimately put up on the website for folks. So
yeah.
we need what Jim is doing, but at some point it's got to be folded into an official document coming from you to the council. Does that make sense, Mike and
Yes.
Tom?
It does, but I guess as a practical matter, should I wait for Jim's edits? Like, for example, this issue we're talking about with the increase in the property valuation.
I would wait.
We've discussed that, Diane and I, previously, and I haven't made those changes
Yeah.
on our summary, but I'm happy to.
I mean,
So I guess I don't mind doing it, but it seems like we're doing the same thing.
right, no, I think, I mean, I would share whatever I'm gonna do with you and Olga and Diane, obviously, and everybody else here. I mean, I'm thinking what you're talking about is the actual department budgets and the line item budgets that need to be approved by.
Yeah.
I kind of look at the projected tax rate and that sort of thing as information that helps the town council to frame whether they accept the budget or not or want to make changes, but I don't believe they would vote on anything to do, well,
I can't see, I mean, last year, we agreed to accept the recommendation of the committee. We did have that difference of opinion on what our,
dispatch.
not, weren't we off by something? We had to
Oh,
take
yes,
40-something
yes, there was,
thousand, or
some-
59,000 out of
There were some
stabilization
kind
to.
of last minute
Yeah,
changes.
there was a last minute miscalculation that we weren't, the council hadn't seen. But anyway, I don't, I'm looking at Tom and Mike. Do you see the rest of the counselors trying to dismantle a particular number? They know how much work goes into this. And we're giving rationale and, you know, it's been approved by 8 people for 4 months as we take all these steps. I don't see the rest of the council being at issue and saying, we want to change that figure to XYZ.
With
Can I
all our
make-
excuse me. Go ahead,
Go
Chris.
ahead, Mike. Well, last year's scenario
Right,
was that the town manager had submitted a budget.
correct.
It
Draft.
had an increase of $4 million.
Yes,
And this committee looked at it so that your budget, or the town manager's budget, because the town manager is responsible for the budget that's presented to the council. This year, very nicely, I have to say, we all worked together and did these numbers. Now, as far as the, like any other budget where you have a request and a determination by yourself and then by this committee, we've been in agreement. And I think in the final budget, we can certainly state what the school has requested, what they have cut to date, what has been requested to date. Because I have a feeling further changes will happen with that budget, depending on what the legislature does. So I wouldn't be, if you're in agreement with what we're presenting now, I wouldn't be so concerned. And then when the state numbers are in, then you can present your budget. If it's the same as ours, fine. And if it isn't, you make your presentation and we make ours. How does that sound?
Well, it's fine. I think it makes sense to do it that way. I just don't want to deviate from what the charter requires or what the council's appetite might
well,
support.
if I can
Understood.
jump in, what the charter requires literally seems to have been set aside with the governor's emergency orders here.
Right.
So I don't see us or you in outside the parameters of what's written in the current charter because a higher power has superseded all of that and allowed for the 1/12 formula, which they're gonna use, as you had said, for July, August, and possibly September or more. So trying to follow the May 31st or June 1st deadline is, to me, a moot issue at this point.
I just wanted to be clear that if the town manager budget posts the number that the school committee voted on, that would be the only differing number from everything I've gleaned over the last 3 months.
Yeah.
That would be the only number different from what this committee has recommended. Because we're in agreement on all the capital, on all the debt service is gonna be what it is, but all of you haven't really cut department budgets but for the police, or that issue about the positions.
Yeah.
So it just seems like I'm happy to, Olga, you'd be very happy to prepare that document if we need to, but it seems like superfluous to me, but.
Yes.
It is a good distinction. I mean, last year, the town manager had presented a budget to the town council. I think it was dated April 29th.
Right.
Right.
And so the Financial Oversight Committee, as I recall, was formed to work with, to review that budget and make its own separate recommendations to the town council. So our whole format was, here's what was proposed, here's what we recommend, here's the differences, and the town council voted on to accept those recommendations, and then the town manager had to go back and
Adjust.
make the budget accordingly. Here, this is in essence your budget.
It feels like it is.
Yes, and with the, I don't know, I guess, with the help of having other eyes on it
Exactly.
to assist you in working through it for the purposes of presenting to the town council. So it is a different animal. I would think that, I would think you probably need to be prepared to have your detailed budgets all consistent with the summary stuff that we have, because if there are questions, they would be there. We haven't focused on that very much once we went through our review. So in
Okay,
essence,
well,
it
that's
is your budget, and we're just making recommendations to that effect, if you're comfortable with that, Mary.
Very, thank you. I guess the rest of my questions would be more council related, so in terms of what documents you want in advance, all those line item budgets, et cetera. I mean, it's a lot.
Last year we did print up a packet and gave it to each council member so that they could follow along. We make our presentation explain certain things as we go through the packet. And we could be prepared to do that as well.
Do you surmise that your presentation on the 14th is going to be preceded by one from me? Or are we going to do this as a joint venture?
I would think it'd be joint.
I see it as a joint.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
I just want to be clear. I don't want to miss the point here of what your expectations are.
No,
When we started, Mary, we accepted all the changes you had made to that point.
Right.
And
Yeah.
they were your changes, and we respected that and accepted them.
Okay. Okay.
So,
yeah, Chris, I think Jim stated correctly, this is a different animal this year with the change in the budget process from the state government. So what we've done was work jointly with you to create your budget for a presentation to the finance committee, who has the ability to change it and make other recommendations to the council. And then it's up to the council to decide which one they want to go with.
Okay.
Yes.
Question through the chair. Kathy, to respond to the question you asked, as I remember it last year, I think we all do, we were out in the auditorium when the draft budget was presented. There were quite a few angry residents because there was $4 million added to that budget. And we realized that would have been an increase in the mill rate to be approximately $2, which is about 25 cents per $500,000. So from there, we formed the subcommittee, and we've formed numerous subcommittees over the last few years to tackle these projects that are much too large for anyone to digest during a council meeting. And my memory, if it serves me correct, that 99% of the time, any recommendation that a subcommittee makes to the entire council, they understand the time and the due diligence that was put into that to come out with the the numbers that seem to work best for the community and the residents, and it was accepted. Tom, did you remember any negative or pushback from the council when a subcommittee made a recommendation to them?
I can't recall any because.
So I think you're
They-
spot
they're
on.
Clearly, when a subcommittee comes back with a recommendation or a report, there's lively discussion, but I can't recall in the 4 years that we've been a new form of government that we ever had opposing views and the report or the recommendation was overridden by the whole council, so.
Right.
So I think it'll be a
Yeah.
very smooth process like it was last year. I remember it like it was yesterday when Chris and Jim came in and actually made the presentation as the chair, and we adopted it. So,
Yeah. Mary, to your question too, are there going to be any other objections from other councilors? And I think Kathy mentioned that. The answer is we don't know. I can't speak for them, but I would think so. Like Kathy mentioned, a lively debate could occur depending on the tax rate that's proposed. If it's as it was last year, it brought up a lot of ire in the community. It was over. I think it was $2.07.
Yeah.
Was the first go around. It's like that's ridiculous. We're not going to present that.
Yeah, I have no issue if there's debate. I guess on the substance of
I
things,
just
we can
can't
talk all
imagine
night,
seeing
but
it.
neither can
I just meant, my question was more procedural. I didn't know if you were gonna expect a separate document and presentation from me that would then essentially be echoed by Jim and Chris.
Well, I think, I can speak for Jim in this, we think you're in compliance with the charter, Mary, because you work very well with us.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess we're all happy together, so we'll see how the rest of the community feels.
Okay, that being, yes, Jim?
So, speaking of the schools, we're kind of all in agreement. I know the schools voted to go with that 143 number, the number that when we were together,
Yes.
we had calculated as the rationale, and then we had put it up to 200,000 for rounding up.
Yes.
So that's, as Mary said, that's the only really big disagreement. I mean, the difference is $56,613. With our $200,000 reduction, the school budget was a 1.3% increase over last year.
Yeah.
If you take the 56,000 and add it back in, it's a 1.5% increase over last year. I guess I just throw it out that, if you twisted my arm, I wouldn't go crazy. I mean, I wouldn't walk off the plank if, we allowed that budget that they proposed, because we did kind of walk through the rationale for it. And it still seems quite a reasonable budget given the size of the budget. And we know that we're basing it on our best guesses at this time, and changes much more substantial than that may need to come when we find out more information from the state or whatever in terms of their support. So I guess I just throw it out for one more discussion before we whether or not we want to consider using their approved one versus their voted one, or sticking with our 200,000. It's not a big deal either way, but.
Well, Jim's point, I don't think it was a rounding up. It was more, we didn't know what the debt service was going to be on the high school project, and that was going to be added in. So I've heard folks throw out stuff like, well, it's an arbitrary number, or it's just a best guess, and it really is a best guess. But it's closer to the 200 than it is to their number, so I'm for sticking with the 200.
I'd like to remind everyone too that the number that we recommended was 200 plus, and it was Mr. Ficero that asked if we could drop the number down to 200. And I believe that's how, it was actually rounded down to 200, so.
Yeah.
Yes,
Good point.
and I think you have to be mindful of the fact that we did put the feasibility study into the budget. That the school will be receiving, they said approximately $260,000 from the CARES Act. So them helping us out to balance the budget with another $56,000 doesn't seem to be an excruciating loss. I did ask Mary this morning if she had an idea of how many reduction in workforce letters were sent out. We were not aware of that at this point in time. So, information from the school would be helpful also. And in the future, we don't know if that Student Opportunity Act is gonna come through with that $80,000.
Right.
So.
If there's one thing that'll be at risk when the governor has to commit to a budget, it'll be the student opportunity. He might be able to stand behind the Chapter 70 level funding, but.
Yeah.
And Chris,
Even Gordon Smith has said, that number is, it's out there, the 82,000 there from student opportunity, but it's more vulnerable to cuts than probably Chapter 70 cuts.
I agree. And Gordon did report they sent 5 notices.
5.
When I was doing this before, I wasn't high-fiving you.
Oh, yeah, that was it. Okay.
It was
5
5 notices.
Okay, very good.
But 6 positions are unfilled according to our conversation, so there's essentially 11 that are
Yeah.
vacant. And Ryan just sent a text asking if you'd like him to come over. Is it necessary?
I don't think so.
Thank you.
No.
And just to say thank you for your comments, because it kind of refreshed my memory of the discussion that we had that day.
Okay. If we're finished with that, is there any other old business or any new business? If not, Mary, can you find out if this room is available for July the 7th? It's a Tuesday,
Certainly can.
and that'll be our.
Make sure everybody here knows that they're supposed to be here.
Yes,
Write it down
I will,
right now. Live on the
I
7th.
did. I did.
I've gotten very comfortably lazy about Zoom meetings.
I'll find out right now.
Chris, just as an aside, we haven't really talked about how we're going to address the revolving funds and enterprise funds, because that's part of the council's decision during the budget process to set those limits and make sure that those funds have the appropriate monies in them.
Yeah, oh, Mary just left me. I don't, I think basically we've accepted the limits that are there for this year. It'll be up to the council to dissolve the one for the SHARPS program through the health department. So we basically only have those 2 that are left. The Council on Aging and the health department. Recreation, I'm sorry. And recreation right now is in a state of flux with their, with what they have to deal with as far as the camps and the compliances and so forth, and sometimes the refund of money. So I think that conversation would be better left until we finalize, because they don't impact the tax rate. So I think in the final budget, perhaps that could be addressed at that point in time.
Yeah, but we were talking about the revolving funds. And I know I spoke to Mary, and she's going to use the template that was used in the past, that she was not aware of, obviously,
Yeah,
to
I think in the
finalize
final,
these documents.
I think in the final budget that whatever Mary does with it should satisfy you. How's that?
Well, we can wait and see what the numbers are. Yeah.
Yes.
It's fine.
Thank you.
All good, okay?
Thank you. You're all set.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. All right, the next meeting will be July 7th here at 10 a.m. No Zoom meetings here.
So you're off next Wednesday?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. We'll let everybody enjoy the weekend and the non-celebration.
Yeah.
The flat 4th, as I call it.
What do you call it?
The flat 4th.
The flat fourth. Okay, if no one has anything else to add, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Let me just say, please, before you do that, I just really want to thank you. You're a great chair, Jim, co-chair, and you made this whole process in this very difficult season much more palatable than I expected it to be.
Good.
I know we're not through yet. It's been a slog, but thank you.
Well, we think you've done a good job too, shepherding everybody through this, Mary, so. All right,
Move to adjourn.
second? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.